The streets of Denver glowed with twinkling lights that cold December night. Shop windows sparkled with holiday displays. Giant red ribbons, glimmering ornaments, and toy trains that circled endlessly in perfect loops. Families hurried home with shopping bags, their laughter rising like music into the snowy air. It was Christmas Eve, the night when warmth and joy filled every corner of the city. James Carter adjusted the scarf around his neck and smiled down at his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, who skipped beside him, clutching a small teddy bear they had just bought. James was no ordinary father. He was a self-made millionaire, a man who had built his fortune through real estate investments and sheer determination. Yet despite his wealth, he lived a quiet life, dedicated to raising Lily after losing his wife 3 years earlier. "Daddy, can we make hot cocoa when we get home?" Lily asked, her eyes shining beneath her woolen hat. "Of course, sweetheart," James replied, his heart warming at the thought of a cozy Christmas Eve together. But just as they crossed the snowy plaza toward the parking lot, Lily suddenly stopped. Her tiny hand tugged on James's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, pointing. James followed her gaze and froze. There, on a bench outside the mall, sat a young woman. Her knees were pulled to her chest, her thin jacket barely covering her shivering body. Her shoes looked worn, her hands tucked deep into her sleeves to fight the bitter cold. Snowflakes settled on her hair, but she didn't brush them away. Her eyes were closed, her face pale with exhaustion. She looked far too young to be living on the streets. "Daddy, why is she sleeping here?" Lily's voice was soft, innocent, filled with confusion. James swallowed hard, his chest tightening. For all his success, all his wealth, nothing had prepared him for his daughter's question. He had taught Lily about kindness, about sharing, about being grateful for what they had, but now, standing there in front of this fragile stranger, he realized those lessons meant little if he didn't act on them. She doesn't have a home, sweetheart," James finally answered, his voice heavy. Lily's eyes widened. "Not even on Christmas?" James shook his head slowly. He looked again at the woman, her lips trembling as her body shook with the cold. The festive glow of the city seemed cruelly out of place against the sight of someone so alone, so forgotten, on a night when no one should be. For a moment, James considered walking on. It would be easy. He had a warm car waiting, a beautiful home filled with food and gifts. But Lily's questioning eyes stopped him. If he turned away now, what would that teach her? That kindness ends where discomfort begins? That Christmas joy is only for those who can afford it? No, he couldn't let that be the lesson. James took a deep breath and stepped closer to the bench. Snow crunched under his shoes as he leaned down, his voice gentle. "Miss," he said softly, "are you all right?" The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked startled at first, then embarrassed. I'm fine," she whispered, her voice trembling with both cold and shame. But James knew she wasn't fine, and as he glanced at Lily, her small face full of worry, he realized this Christmas Eve was about to change more than just his own family's holiday. James Carter had every reason to keep walking that night. His life was comfortable, his daughter's world was safe, and his responsibilities as a single father were already heavy. But something about the woman on the bench, and the way Lily's innocent eyes looked up at him, made it impossible to ignore. He knelt down beside the stranger, brushing snow from her thin coat. "Miss," he said softly, "it's freezing out here. You can't stay like this. Let me help." The woman stirred, blinking through exhaustion. "No, I'm fine," she murmured, though her trembling body betrayed her words. Her cheeks were red from the cold and her voice cracked with embarrassment. "You don't look fine," James replied gently. He reached into the shopping bag and pulled out a wrapped scarf he had bought as an extra gift. Carefully, he draped it around her shoulders. "Here, at least take this." Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the scarf. Why are you being kind to me?" she whispered. Before James could answer, Lily stepped forward, her small mittened hand reaching out. "Because it's Christmas," she said simply. The woman's lips trembled. For the first time that night, she smiled faintly. James stood, offering his hand. "Come with us. We have a warm home, plenty of food. You don't have to spend Christmas Eve out here alone." The woman shook her head. I couldn't. I'd just be a burden." "You'd be a guest," James said firmly. "Please." For a moment she hesitated, shame and fear written across her face. But when she looked at Lily, her wide, innocent eyes filled not with pity but with hope. Her defenses crumbled. Slowly, she placed her cold hand in James's and he helped her to her feet. By the time they reached James's home, the warmth of the fireplace welcomed them in from the snowy night. The mansion was decorated with twinkling lights, stockings hung along the mantel, and the smell of fresh pine filled the air. James guided her to a soft chair near the fire while Lily hurried to fetch cookies and cocoa. The woman introduced herself as Sarah. She explained, hesitantly, how she had lost her job after an injury, how bills piled up, and how eventually she had nowhere else to go. She spoke with a mixture of shame and exhaustion, expecting judgment. But instead, James listened with compassion, and Lily sat at her side, holding her hand as if she were family already. Dinner that night was simple but magical. Sarah found herself laughing at Lily's playful jokes, smiling as James told stories from his own childhood, and feeling warmth she hadn't known in years. Around that glowing fireplace, she felt seen, not as a homeless woman, not as a failure, but as a human being who still mattered. When midnight came, Sarah whispered, "Thank you. I thought I'd be invisible forever. But tonight, I feel alive again." James looked at her kindly. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Sarah, especially on Christmas." And as the snow fell gently outside, Sarah realized that what began with a little girl's simple question had become her miracle. A night that would remind her and everyone in that home that kindness has the power to change lives. It was a Christmas Eve none of them would ever forget.